Hey there, you rebelicious soul. It is great to have you here. I'm excited to inspire you again today, and I hope that this podcast episode will open up new possibilities within you. Enjoy and feel free to reach out if I can support you in any way. Have you noticed how our society values independence and how we are always taught to empower ourselves individually, how we need to stand on our own 2 feet? And there are beautiful elements to this idea. However, it's really taken away from our ability to relate. One of the main lessons, false lessons, that life taught me early on was, well, Michelle, in the end, you can only trust yourself. So I was quite young when I learned that even my mother would prioritize something else over me. And in this case, it was her faith. Just a side note, that was back then. Nowadays, we're very good. We're in a good place. But at that time, she was basically brainwashed into telling me, I love you, but I love God more. I learned at that time, combined with all the lessons in my earlier childhood, but I learned that I was less important. I'm not saying that I wasn't important, but I basically learned everyone else's needs come before mine. Always. And my response at that time was to guard myself against needing something or anyone, to always stay in control, to focus on giving without wanting to receive something back, to never lean into support, simply do it all alone, and basically become ultra-independent. When my father got sick many, many years ago, he got cancer, my first response in that time was actually to break up with my then boyfriend. I had a pretty good relationship, but I had already started to sabotage that by having an affair. After all, I couldn't trust anyone, only myself, so why not fuck things up before I got hurt? I simply didn't know how to lean on my partner because I didn't learn that in my earlier years. I learned that I could only lean on myself, and so I ran. And in my marriage, my second marriage, that is, it became the default mode that, everything revolved around my partner and his alcohol abuse. I wasn't as important, so I thought. So basically what I did was, you know what? I'm so independent. I don't need anyone. I completely deactivated my needs for a long time. Obviously, until I learned that there was another way, and I started standing up for myself, and I started choosing myself first. I started choosing myself as well, not just me as in a hierarchy first, but, to understand that I'm important as well. But at that time, I had no idea of what it meant to do things or to really be in a relationship together, to be a team. I didn't know how. I didn't know that this was possible. I would either walk away from something good or stay too long in something bad. It was two extremes and there was no real integration. Now, obviously, this is not about me. I'm not recording this podcast for you to talk about my stuff, but I love bringing myself in and, showing what happened in my life. And this podcast isn't about my mother either or my ex-partners. I'm simply sharing this because, my story is an example that symbolizes, it just shows how we as human beings can get wounded in this battlefield that we call life, and how those wounds massively impact our ability to relate to each other, especially on a romantic level. Our society overly values independence, and we haven't really learned how to be relational, how to be in a real partnership. But what does that really mean, to be in a partnership, especially if, all of society, especially Western society, teaches us, you got to stand on your own 2 feet. You have to, we talk about self-empowerment. We talk about loving yourself first, and putting yourself in the first place. And I think these are, yeah, I get the idea behind it, but we're not taught by society what it means to be in a true partnership in which you both commit to becoming a team, to have each other's backs. It's almost as if, needing something and relying on each other and really wanting something, wanting a connection, as if that's something bad. I actually remember years ago that I caught myself looking down on people who were in a relationship because they need each other. I was like, I don't need anyone. And that was a red flag for me in myself. I was like, oh my God, this is ugly. Because it showed me how incapable I was at that moment to surrender and to rely on others. Also when it gets tough, especially when it gets tough. Because when you enter a relationship, a healthy relationship, you're actually committing. If you know, a healthy relationship means that you're committing to carrying the baggage that you both bring and carrying that together, sharing the load. And that can be quite challenging, especially if you learned otherwise. And if you're like me, where you had to rely on yourself, take care of yourself from a too young age, it becomes even harder. Obviously, the other side of the medallion can be that because there was such an unreliability of your parents, for example, that you actually start clinging to people. You feel that you need others to feel safe. There's two ways that you can go, basically. And in attachment theory, they call that either being more avoidant, love avoidant, which is something that I recognize from where I come from. And the other side of the medallion is becoming more of a love addict, more anxious to really hold on to the relationship. However, in this case, I'm speaking more towards the people who really have that inner independence, that ultra-independence. In that case, the word together and partnership can be quite challenging. Now, I'm not going in too deep in this episode. We're going to tune in deeper later on. But for now, I would love to share shortly with you with what helped me. What really allowed me to understand what it means to step into something together and how I improved that, how I, created new imprints around that. And the first one was for me to actually acknowledge that I had a deep desire to be in a relationship. I've noticed that sometimes the notion of wanting to be in a relationship is shamed because it's like, yeah, but if you're not happy with yourself alone, then you can't be in a relationship. You first need to be happy by yourself. And the thing is, we are wired for connection. We are wired for togetherness. It is very normal to want to have someone to share your life with. So for me to, at some point, acknowledge that desire was such a relief. Like, hey, it's okay. Even though I've learned in the past, I need to do it all by myself. I need to fend for myself. I can't trust anyone. I just so longed for that. I really desired to have someone who would have my back for a chance. I was always the one being there for others. What if I would have someone who could also be there for me? Yeah. And that required quite some courage for me to admit that I actually deeply yearned for it, despite all the fears of like, oof, can I trust someone? Can I really rely on someone? So that was a big step for me. And I wonder if this is something that you recognize, that maybe, for example, if you're single, I'm not a big fan of all those labels, relationship status wise, but let's say that currently you feel that you're single, there's no relationship, but you do desire it. And maybe a part of you still judges that, like, hey, but I need to be okay by myself and I need to focus on me, etc. But what if it's okay? what if it's okay to want to be with someone, to want that togetherness, and take away the shaming around needing someone else? Just to be gentle with yourself, that you are a human being. Ultra-independence is not what we are wired for. We used to live in big groups, actually, in tribes where we would all take care of each other. This individualistic society is not how we were made. It is not what we are wired for. Acknowledging that, and then acknowledging your humanness would be step one. Like, healthy relationships are based on realness. So it's not based on you trying to live up to some self-inflicted expectation or something. I had to really realize, like, hey, I am human and I am flawed. I am imperfect. And this goes for you as well. It is beautiful, actually. You are imperfect, flawed, and deserving of support. And there's nothing wrong with you if you need support. There's nothing wrong with you if you actually need other people, if there are things that you would like from others. It doesn't mean that you're less lovable. It doesn't mean that you're weak. For me, that was a big thing. I really thought, like, oof, I fail, or I will be looked down upon. People will think that I am weak, or I'm just incapable if I admit that. It doesn't make you any less of a man, woman, or whatever whatever you identify with when you fail and you ask for help from the person that chooses you over and over and over again with your mistakes. And sometimes it might actually help to start doing that with friends. If you're so used to your independence, start with a really close friend and start asking them for help. So instead of always being there for others and making room for others, which is a very safe place, really, just think of it. It can also be a safety thing, a protection mechanism, to always listen to everyone else's story and be that therapist in your circle of friends. But when will you open up and be vulnerable to others? You are allowed to be human and also rely on your friends. And that might be a very beautiful step if there's one person that you trust, that you can practice with. So that at some point, if that relationship comes along, or even if you're already in a relationship, if it feels a little bit safer to rely on a friend, then start there so that you can integrate those qualities or those skills actually in your relationship as well. The thing is, acknowledging your humanness makes you even more relatable and therefore easier to be in a relationship with. And then the third thing that I had to acknowledge for myself was, or acknowledge in my relationship, is that my partner is my partner. And in my case, it's a dude. And he may push my buttons. And in your case, your partner will push your buttons and reflect all of your flaws and mistakes. But they are not your mother, father, ex-partners, and so on. They are your partner. And just realizing that, like, they're my partner and we stand next to each other, it means that you give them a position of equality, of really standing next to each other in life and having each other's backs, not one way around. It's not a one-way traffic, it's two ways. So by giving them the place in your life that they deserve without projecting or blaming your past onto them, this will really allow you to keep seeing each other for who you both are. And this is an important piece here. Often we unconsciously start seeing our partners as, for example, our father, our mother, etc. Remember that nobody was born alone. We are interconnected as a society. This is simply inherent to being alive. Your ultra-independence doesn't make you necessarily strong or something. It is actually your willingness and your courage to lean in and be vulnerable. That's what makes you strong. Because then you're really showing yourself. Then you're really bringing yourself in with all of who you are, with all of your humanness. Yeah, and whether that's in a romantic relationship or a different one, And as for me, I make many mistakes still. I still have a tendency to deactivate my needs instead of understanding, yes, I have needs because I'm human. Yes, I am flawed. But I've really learned, and I hope that you will take that from this episode, that you are as important as anyone else. Your needs are equally important. And you are good enough even with your mistakes and even with your imperfections. And I've learned to do that because I prioritize myself. And that's something that I would love to invite you to do as well. If you prioritize yourself and you are available for yourself, for all of your emotions and your needs and your tendencies and your imperfections, then other people can be available for you as well. But it really starts with, you being available to you. You making space in your relationships for your own needs and your dependence. And it's an interdependence that then happens. Because then it becomes a more equal relationship. As long as you don't bring yourself in and you keep fending for yourself, thinking that you need to do it all alone, then you're not fully committed to that relationship. You're not bringing yourself in. And it starts with you taking that first step towards leaning in, towards the togetherness. And it's scary, I know. It requires trust. But it will bring you so much bliss and beauty and lessons and growth. And I can only wish for you to let go a little bit more of that wall around you and dare to lean in and really trust that there are people very willing to have your back. Thank you so much for listening. It's been my absolute pleasure to share this with you again. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode, and if you're hungry for more, please check out my website, michellecoops.com, and subscribe to my newsletter in which I share so much value every single week. Have a magical day. Stay raw, stay real, stay revelicious.